Imagine you are an attacker trying to break into a web server. You don't know what's inside yet. But what if you could trick the server into showing you files it was never meant to expose? In this lab, we are going to discuss the directory traversal attack. So what's a directory traversal attack? It's also called a path traversal attack. So this is when someone tries to access files outside the web root directory. Now let me just give you an example. So if you recall, we previously completed the lab of SQL injections in which we had localhost and then SQLi-basic. And then we land on this login page, okay? So now what the attackers do is that they know that this particular folder on the local system may have more additional files, maybe files with credentials or passwords, and they're hoping that the server doesn't properly validate file paths and they can basically try different combinations and end up seeing the actual files. Let me show you what is exactly in this folder and then we'll go to the next part where I'll describe how they actually launch the attack. So if I go to the file system, go to where, www, html, and this is the folder basically which you're seeing here, okay? SQLi basic. So what does this contain? So this contains a bunch of files. It has, for example, this connection.php file, which basically contains the logic to access the database, to connect to the database. We also have SQLi basic.php. So this is the file which basically handles. So when you do username and password and you click login, this is the file which is basically going to handle all the logic. It's going to get your username, password, send it to the database, and basically handle the login thing. We also have this file, for example, style.css. So for just to show you, it contains instructions on how to format your page. So basically look and feel. So similarly, sometimes servers, they often have secret files or files which contain sensitive information or credentials. Now what the attackers try to do is that they're not supposed to basically see this file. So they should land on this one or this one, okay? But they might try it. So the way they can try it is just by giving style.css, for example. So now we were able to access the actual contents of this file. Similarly, they can also try to access other confidential files. Now in directory traversal attack, one step which they do is that, so in Linux, if you do .. this basically means go one level up. So basically, if you see here, if I go one level up, we have all of these files, okay? So for example, let me see if we can access startup.sh. So if I go here and I do startup.sh, there you go. I was able to access this file as well. So that's how attackers will try to parse or traverse the directory, go one folder up, two folders up. So for example, they can even go two folders up, okay? They can do .. and so on. So in this lab, we're going to discuss how we can use Snort to monitor sensitive web access. So as usual, we'll start the lab as always. We'll go to cd desktop/labs and then run sudo /main script.sh, okay? So now please note that we'll be using the same lab, Snort IDS lab. The same script is going to initialize everything for this lab as well. So in the previous lab, we saw how we can use Snort to listen on different network interfaces and basically detect alerts. So we'll go with Snort IDS lab. And once again, please bear in mind, the order of these labs may have changed. So you have to check the name. So Snort IDS lab. There's 3 for now. And then we need to start everything from scratch once again. So just to reset anything, because we added rules last time. So let's just reset it. Okay, Snort seems to be running. Everything is good so far. So now etc/password. So in the etc folder, the password file is a well-known file on Linux systems that historically contained user account information, including hashed passwords in older systems. So some new systems store this information in etc shadow. So attackers may attack firstly this one, and then they may try to see if they can access the contents of this one via the web server. But usually their first line of attack is always on etc password. Okay, so this helps them discover user accounts, perform reconnaissance, and exploit directory traversal vulnerabilities. So in order to detect such an attack, we're going to use the rule. Let me just create the rule here. Let me open a new tab. So once again, sudo vi as always, snort rules, and then local.rules. Okay, Kelly is the password. I'm going to press I so that we go in insert mode here. Now I'm going to go to the end of the file. Okay, so now we are ready to write the rule. Let me just zoom in a little bit. Okay, so the rule that we want to write is alert. As always, this is TCP traffic, right? So someone is trying to access the web server, and web server is always TCP. And then 172.17.0.1, because this is coming from the Kali Linux, which has this IP address. We already know that. And it is going to the nginx container.0.2. And then which port would it be? So that would be port 80, because we are going to access the web server. Okay. And now what do we want to display? Okay. So the message would be, for example, directory traversal attack on. So someone is trying to, for example, let's say access this file. Okay. Now here's the thing. So you have to put in the content that whenever you detect this thing in the URL, you need to alert us. Okay. So this part of the messages is very flexible. It allows you to define several different rules. So for example, you can put whatever is there in the content, you can basically alert on that. And then as always, we have to use the SID. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 zeros. This one was 3, so let's use 4 here. And then I'm going to press escape, write, quit. There you go. Let me just check if it is actually showing the correct contents of the file. So I'm going to run this line, sudo cat etc snort rules local.rules. So there you go. It seems like Vim has not messed things up. Going ahead. So once again, you have to relaunch the main script. Okay, so the reason we're doing it because Snort is already running, right? So it has already read the old local.rules file, but we now want it to read the updated one. Okay, so we're going to launch it again. And this Snort is going to terminate automatically because the script takes care of that. So main script.sh, Kelly, we're going to go with Snort IDS lab, whichever option that is. Now it's 3. And now in this one, we don't want to overwrite the rules file to default because we have already added our rule, which we can see here. So we don't want this one overwritten. So we'll go with option 2. Now Snort seems to be listening to the Docker 0 interface, as you can see here. So if you scroll to the top, it's listening to, once again, the Docker 0 interface, and it's using the fast alert mode. Okay. So now how do we trigger it? Okay. So now how do we trigger it? So basically we'll try to access this web server. Okay. So let's go here. So, okay. So now we want to go to 172 HTTP 172.17.0.2 because SQLi Basic was basically living on the Kali Linux VM, but this is the IP address of the nginx container which we want to access now. And then we want to try to basically access, you can do directly, for example, etc password, or you can also try to maybe, attackers are going to basically try different combinations. This could be one combination, another combination could be this one. So regardless of whether, we actually found a file or not, the more important thing is whether an alert was generated or not, which it was. There you go, directory traversal attack on etc password. And this is coming from the Kali Linux and going towards the nginx container on port 80. Perfect. So now here is your challenge. So your manager has asked you that they have some suspicion that some hackers have been trying to access a sensitive credentials file that is stored on the server at this URL. So this is the file name, and basically they're trying to do a directory traversal attack, trying to discover different files. This is an internal file and no one apart from authorized users should be able to view it, as it contains sensitive credentials to access different servers as well as databases. However, they're suspicious that someone has been trying to access it repeatedly and failing to do so. So your job is to write a rule that would alert on traffic coming from any IP, any port, but going to the nginx web server and trying to access this file. So once again, you'll use Vim to edit the local.rules file, add the rule that we are asking you to, and then you're going to basically save the file and relaunch the lab. And when you relaunch the lab, you're going to select option 2, in which we don't overwrite the rules file, okay? And then to trigger the rule, you can basically check it here. So once you're done with the rule and Snort is running, you can basically see if this thing is working or not, okay? And by the way, we were able to access sensitive passwords, okay? That seems bad, right? So now it's your job to write a rule which is going to generate an alert so that security professionals in your organization can take some steps. And as always, solution will be in the next lecture.